Hey guys, this will be a review of chapter 1014 named The Ham. If you haven't read the chapter, then I encourage you to go read it and then come back. This was a pretty good one. So, off the bat, dissecting the name of the cover art request. So, the name of the chapter, The Lifelong Ham Actor. I had to search up ham actor, what it actually meant, because I didn't really know what it meant. So what ham actor translates to is a overacting actor. So actor, I know when I read it, I knew it was probably going to make reference to KANJURO and probably do something in reference to him. And searching it up, ham actor, overreactive actor, KANJURO, very obvious. The cover art request, we can see Law using his wits to catch a tiger, sort of imitating a Zen monk. The sort of request that was given to Oda to draw, which is interesting because apparently it was Law making use of his wits, which when we consider Law as one of the favorite characters in One Piece, his quirky humor and his seriousness combined sort of fits his entire character arc almost. It's a really fun and creative cover art request overall, and it's interesting to see Oda incorporating more and more members of the worst generation into these cover art requests, almost putting them in a different light to what the canon story shows us. So, starting off with the chapter, we can see the aftermath of Kaido versus Luffy. So we can see that off the bat, we can see Kaido is pretty impressed about Luffy being able to code his attack with Conquerors. It was like Kaido kind of giving him credit for what he was able to do, because there's obviously not many people in the world who are able to tap into Conqueror's Haki and make use of it in their attacks. We only were introduced to it lately. So it's like him saying it's impressive that he's able to do it, but he's also establishing a large gap between their technique. He's basically saying he's strong, but lacks the experience that Kaido holds in the battle, which kind of flattens out the belief everybody had that Luffy was growing too strong. He was growing too strong in the story, but in reality, it was just him unlocking new abilities, but he still lacks the experience to stack up against a Yonko. So it kind of establishes the gap or difference in their abilities. There was also a reference to JOYBOY and the quote being said, that is, "It seems like you couldn't be JOYBOY either." Now this quote this quote is what made me focus and realize this chapter is pretty interesting. It kind of brought me back to reality and to understand that yeah, something definitely interesting is happening, because he makes reference to JOYBOY and we've never seen Kaido make reference to JOYBOY before. Also, it was on bold, so it probably means something, right? So the reference that he made to JOYBOY made me think of a couple of things. It could suggest that JOYBOY's legend and his past could be based off strength, because it was right after the battle of Luffy and Kaido. So it could mean that maybe JOYBOY's overall legend could be based off physical strength, could be based off Conquerors potentially, because he's talking right after quote-unquote slaughtering Luffy. Another thought was that might be reference to JOYBOY's devil fruit powers. This is very unlikely to be true. There's a idea going around that Roger could have had the Gomu Gomu fruit, and now it's probably going to be pending the idea that JOYBOY potentially had the Gomu Gomu no Mi, because it was right after he said the go-to phrase that Luffy uses to name his attacks. So that was pretty interesting. There was also a thought in my mind that that quote could be the idea of Luffy not living up to JOYBOY's legacy, because we've seen that Luffy, he does more than carry Roger's will, but he also carries JOYBOY's will. In the bigger picture, he carries JOYBOY's will. So that idea is explored here, but Kaido saying that he doesn't live up to that legacy. The either, he said, quote-unquote either, could refer to the other comparisons Kaido had initially made against other Conins that he had in the past, because he's come across Roger, he's come across Whitebeard, he's come across Rocks, and he's competed and went up against these many characters in the story who could potentially, specifically Roger and Rocks, who could be carrying on the will that Roger had or Rocks had. Or it could be the anti-parallel between Rox's will and Roger's will, or Rox's will and JOYBOY's will. It could interlink with Kaido's past with JOYBOY, as I said before. The Rocks Pirate's legacy as anti-parallel to JOYBOY's legacy, almost a clash of wills, something like that. We can see the raid is starting to take a turn as the outcome of the rooftop battle ends in defeat, and now Kaido's on the loose. Luffy was the only, I guess, towards the end of that battle, after everybody left, Luffy was the last sort of obstruction or person to stand in Kaido's way. But now that Luffy is we know that he's temporarily defeated, he's now out of his shackle. Kaido is now free to roam around Onigashima, wreaking havoc, and now he's going to be causing more harm than initially. Now we can see the raid starting to lose its will and its drive as we start to see potentially the fall of the raid, but we don't know for sure. And then we see Kaido flexing the outcome of the battle throughout Onigashima. This also kind of examines the method that he uses to defeat his enemy, because in the introduction, when we got introduced to Kaido, his build and his strength and his overall introduction made it seem like he's just going to be another big, strong, bulky character whose main role and drive is just to beat characters physically and overcome them physically just for the sake of it. But now we're starting to see a little bit more layers in his character, because he doesn't simply physically beat the characters that he goes up against, but his entire goal is to actually destroy their will. Not just physically overcome the characters, but to destroy their will, because he sees that as more of an effective method in overcoming the characters that he goes up against. Shows a little bit more depth and almost some tacticality, almost, if that's the word, that he uses to overcome the characters in the story that he goes up against. That's being a pirate is one of his goals. That could be instilled on him by rocks. It could be a method that's instilled on him by rocks or anybody else who taught him, or just a hard lifestyle that he had as a indestructible beast could have led him to do that. But we come to see a little bit more depth in his character overall. Then we move on to the Yamato and Momonosuke scenes, where we come to see the extensivity of the entire war, how vast and wide it is, because even like Oda's still making reference to a few people not knowing that Yamato has actually joined the side of the Straw Hats, which makes us kind of see how vast and wide this war is, because there are still a lot of people, even though it's been announced or to many people that Yamato is kind of helping the Straw Hats, it's still like it's a vast, wide battle. So it kind of makes you understand how big this war is, and sort of makes you visualize that, or at least mentally understand how massive this entire war is. We can also see Yamato continuously putting herself in the place of Odin, as she says, "I am Odin, I am not free, I am Odin," constantly almost making herself be in his position. Now, my belief is that Yamato is going to be the final member of the Straw Hats. She's also going to join them on their journey, because judging from the way she's behaving and acting and what she said in this chapter, it makes it seem like she's carrying on the will of Odin and going off parallels on Roger Pirates and the Straw Hat Pirates. We can kind of see that maybe she's going to be carrying on the will of Odin and joining the Straw Hats on their journey to locate and find the One Piece. That's my belief. We can also see that Momonosuke's growth in both wisdom. I feel like he's grown in wisdom as well. Like the quote, "It seems I cannot afford to die," makes him like he's saying things that I would expect people older than him at least to be saying. So it's a little bit interesting, making it seem a little bit more wisdom in his character. And then somewhere during the battle we come to see Chopper versus Queen, where the outcome of the battle is kind of expected. When I saw the first time Chopper was going up against Queen, I knew that Chopper would be putting up a little bit of a fight, but I didn't think he would be able to do much damage to him, seeing that Chopper's main objective isn't really combat based. So I didn't really see it that he would be delaying him or holding him off, but I didn't think that would be lasting long. And as we can see, he's only tiring himself out, which is the strategy Queen is using, because everybody's seeing it almost as if Chopper is overcoming him in the battle, but in reality he's just tiring himself out in his gigantification. We can see that he only has 10 minutes left, and my hope is that sometime in between that maybe Sanji will come in and take over the battle, but we never know. We can see that Queen's method of combat is not exactly just head-on, like Luffy's method of combat, just head-on taking on the enemy. He's tiring him out. He's sort of making him lose his stamina and his endurance, and sort of waiting for him to get weak and then overcome him. So we can see a little bit of tactical play in the way that the Beast Pirates go through with their battles. We can see that they're very experienced in the way that they fight. Perospero, we can just see him chilling. He's literally just chilling, watching them battle. I think he sides with the Beast Pirates for now, and he's shooting arrows at, I don't know, whoever. It's just anyone there. I don't think he really cares about really anyone, but Perospero is just chilling. He's just there. Queen's new attack, black coffee. Pretty interesting. I don't know if that's the exact name of it. Seems a little off to be. I mean, a named attack for Queen, I would think it would be related to partying or disco or something like that associated with him. But you know, maybe sort of interlinks with something else associated with him, of black coffee or something. I don't know. We also get announcement to Onigashima about Luffy's defeat. And this is where another one of those moments where the Straw Hats express their disbelief of the outcome of the battle. We can see Chopper saying that's impossible, that can't be true. His disbelief that Luffy would be able to be beaten. It's a similar trend expressed by majority of the Straw Hats. They're so extremely confident and hopeful in their captain that they just can't, it's not possible for them to believe that he's been overcome or he's been defeated. Maybe they do believe he's been overcome, but I don't think they would ever be able to believe that Luffy is killed. They will always have that hope in their captain. The moment again, Sanji and Zoro saying screw that to Kaido's request for them to surrender. We can obviously see both of them as loyal as they ever were to Luffy and the entire rebellion, I guess. Kid still doesn't display any sort of loss or will. We can see that he's still going strong. He doesn't really care. Kid is one of the few people who actually sit separate to everybody else in the war, because Luffy is kind of the fighting will. Because what Kaido did is he was using Luffy's defeat as a method of destroying other people's will and their hearts to fight. And so Kid, he doesn't really care what happens to the Straw Hat. He's a pirate, so he doesn't really care. He's one of the few people who sits separate to the idea of Straw Hat or Luffy being overcome, and he doesn't really think that's a big deal. He has his own drive, he has his own will to fight for. That's what I'm saying. Law, on the other hand, is a little worried because he's one of the few people who's actually there during, I guess, Kid, Killer, Law, Luffy, and Zoro. They were the 5 people who were there who were going up against Kaido. And so Law was one of the last people who actually saw Luffy during that battle. So it would make sense if he's a little worried because, you know, it's Kaido. In a one-on-one fight, always bet on Kaido. And this is also our first glimpse of Jinbe versus Who's Who. And it's interesting how Oda didn't just introduce that as its own sort of segment in a chapter, but instead he just introduces them randomly. So at least we now know what's happening. Nothing significant. It's not like going to be an introduction where one of them has just completely overcome the other. So maybe Oda will sort of continue on with that battle in a separate chapter, potentially. And then this final scene of the chapter where Momonosuke, we can see he's still reacting to what's happening, and KANJURO, his appearance, again imitating Odin. And it's interesting how I was saying that Momonosuke was displaying some form of wisdom, but he's still so gullible so as to believe that his father is still there. I guess you can say it's his father, the connection that he has makes him feel that way, but still, as a child, it makes sense. He's still as gullible as ever, naive. Kiku, knowing it's not Odin, but still failing to kill him, it's because of her loyalty to Odin. We could criticize her for, you know, not attacking KANJURO with her full effort because carrying the form of Odin. So we can criticize her, but her history, her past, that links with Odin and what he had done and how he impacted her life, we can come to see just how much she cares for him. And so it's not going to be easy for her to strike him down, even though it's not him. That's how strongly Odin has impacted on her life. And we can also see the quote from Ashura, where he says, even the sharpest swords becomes dull when pointed at a friend, which kind of perfectly sums up what is happening with Kiku, because she can't exactly strike through a person who's imitating, even though it's KANJURO imitating him, her sword is dull when put up against a friend. In this case, it's not her friend, but still, the point still sort of stands. She's unable to take on Odin because of the history that she has with him. We can see at the end, it's fitting. I think even though there's the idea that Oda doesn't like killing off characters, or he just doesn't kill off characters at all, I think even though I do agree that he doesn't like killing characters, they just somehow come back and find their way to come back into the story. I think this is a fitting end to KANJURO. I think this made sense. If this is what happened, I think this makes sense purely because he himself came to say this is closing the curtains to his story. And it's a fitting end that Kinemon was the one who had to take him down. I think the fact that happened and Kinemon's strength and his resolve, I don't think KANJURO is alive. I think that's it. I think he's done. But we never know. But that would be a good way to end KANJURO's overall story arc, I guess, in one. What's interesting is that he's so invested in his act, because even though he was acting his entire life with the scabbards and with Odin. He was acting for his entire life and he was betraying them in the background. And he's so invested in his act that he still sees him as his best friend, as a fitting end to his whole story arc, which is pretty interesting. Kind of makes you see how sickeningly good at acting he is, but also his whole life is in that story. So even though he was betraying them, his life is that story, and he sees Kinemon still as his friend. And then at the end, we see Kinemon taking the full force of Kaido's attack, and I also recognize that Kiku, if Kaido didn't attack, I wouldn't exactly be sure if Kiku was dead, because Kinemon told Shinobu to take Momonosuke away, but what is interesting is that he didn't tell her to take Kiku away because she was pretty heavily wounded. So now that it's just Kiku and Kinemon left with Kaido, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't think this is the end. I don't think this is the end to him. I don't think he's gonna die, but he's definitely in trouble. So is Kiku. She's already wounded herself. On top of that, she lost an arm, and on top of that, she's in between the clash between Kinemon and Kaido. I don't think that's gonna last long. So yeah, they're probably gonna be in a little bit of trouble, but yeah, that's it. That's the end of the chapter. Kind of sums up what's happening for now. I don't know what's going to happen next couple of chapters. We can see Kaido is going to start wreaking havoc in the war. He's sort of let loose. It's like a lion that's been let out of its cage, cause trouble for the rest of the war. So yeah, let's see what happens following on from the story, and yeah, see you guys.